said, though, here's one thing that I did want to bring up about some of the films I did come across here. The one film that I actually took away the most from that actually was, I'm going to be completely honest, there was one scene in particular that really got me out of all the moments in the movie. And it was for the film, what was it? Across the Line. Oh, Across the Line.
Yeah.
The Exodus of Charlie
Wright.
Wright. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I saw that movie because I'm a big fan of Andy Garcia. I know if you worked with him before on more than one occasion, but anyway, so I saw the movie, and here's what I'm going to say that I appreciate about the film, because quite frankly, I was expecting kind of more of like a high, what's the word to use? More of an action film. That's kind of what I was expecting. But
yeah, that's the way they sold it.
Right.
It wasn't designed that way, but that's okay. Distributors are lazy in that way. They just want to make.
That's an interesting thing that I wanted to bring up too about that, because I've seen you talk on more than one occasion about your experiences on making films and what you're intending on making and how it's supposed to be marketed for you to get the projects on various markets around the world. Because there's only a handful of genres that appeals to the mass audience. But the point I'm getting at with this one is that when I saw that movie, to be completely frank with you, that was the film that I felt like I connected with the most so far that I've come across you with your filmography. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that I remember specifically that I really actually I felt the most connection with here is with the character of Mary, I believe, played by Claudia Ferry.
Yeah, Ferry. Sure.
Okay. Yeah. So with her character, this is one of the things about the film that I really did enjoy, because essentially you have a lot of these high-powered individuals who have a lot of power, but yet the power is just stripped away from them, and then they're on the verge of having to answer for their sins, if you will. Mm-hmm. So that's the part of the story that I found rather interesting. But the one particular moment in the film that I actually connected with the most, oddly enough, is when Mary was in a scene with Aiden's character. I forgot his name. Charlie. Sorry.
Charlie Wright. Mm-hmm.
So she was obviously inviting him for what seems to be, at least on the surface, for obvious reasons. But then when you get to see how she's very vulnerable, very lonely, that to me spoke a lot about what the film is really about, of guys who are completely alone in the world that they live in, mm-hmm. where a lot of people were outing them for various reasons. They're pushing them out, and they're not being respected for the things they've done in the past, or whatever the case may be. Having seen that scene in the movie, that's when I realized, okay, so now I think I understand the story. And then that's where I started to believe, where I think I understand your approach with your story, where there is it's almost like a reverse engineering type of way of how I looked at it. And with that film, I connected with the most. Now I've seen Legacy. I actually saw Larceny as well too. And I actually didn't get finished to watching, there was a film that you did with Tom Sizemore, the name Hustle Down.
Hustle Down.
Yeah, that's the one. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then seeing, because I've heard you talk before about what the plot synopsis with day labor was. So to me, it's clearly obvious that there is a certain thought process you have about how you want to tell your stories, but you're using the genre as a way to be able to be the gateway to be able to share these stories, as a way to be able to, use for them to be sold into all these various markets.
Right.
But my real question is because when I saw that movie, I think I said before, I felt like I have a better understanding of how you are as a storyteller that I really did truly appreciate. So there's usually one or two projects that I come across that I connect with the most. So I'm not trying to say I'm disregarding all the other films. That's not what I'm getting at.
I get it. No, it's a completely different piece. Right. But go ahead, finish your question, and I'll.
Well, no, I was just trying to point out that there's always one or two projects that I connect with that I feel like I think is the proper identity as a filmmaker, as far as what they want to do and what they're trying to go for when it comes to the films that they're making. Which leads me to so it's kind of like a question that I want to ask you now, which will lead into my question about day labor, because there's something really interesting about that plot synopsis that I found really unique, but I was curious to hear about the journey that had led up to that making of the film. So the question is that I feel like, with what you were trying to accomplish with that movie, I'm not sure if it was very difficult for you to get that film made because of the story you wanted to make, and that there had when people were showing interest, they started to ask you to add more action elements to be able to make the film somewhat marketable, to be able to sell it in all these various markets around the world. So I was really curious about that, because I was expecting a full-on action film, more or less like in the vein of like Heat, if you will, but it wasn't really like that. it was actually a lot more
No,
tame in that respect. So it's kind of a long question, but I hope you understand where I'm trying to lead with this here.
no, I totally get it. Now, one of the things that we do um, in the filmmaking journey is you start off, with stories, and you're just thinking, I just want to tell a story. And
Right.
it's interesting you mentioned the Mary character. Um, uh, it's a pretty deep character. She's an ex-prostitute
Right.
that has this obsession with facial creams
Yeah.
to get rid of wrinkle creams, and she feels in her kind of this delusional way that if she can just get rid of her wrinkles, then many things will be easier for her. And one of the beautiful things is Charlie Wright, who's obviously this billionaire that's running away for various reasons, like kind of like a Bernie Madoff thing, and he's hiding in Mexico. And the thing about it is, in the end of the film, and it's not ruining it, I'm sure it's an old film now, but
Yeah.
he could give her money, but he doesn't. He just gives her like a life supply of wrinkle cream.
Yeah.
Because he realizes how money is not what it's about. If you can find something that makes you happy, and that means something to you, then you don't need the money. He gets given her $1 million and she could have bought it herself, but that meant something to her. And really that $1 million would probably destroy her. And he understood if he could just give her this little silly thing that she wanted. And yeah, so it's like, it's also kind of almost a Forrest Gump character a little bit, where she we see the world through this kind of simple person's life. She just, what are you running from? And it's this big complicated thing where she's got the FBI and these Russian gangsters and the local cartels and everybody looking for him, but she just wants this simple answer. And so there's a lot of things in that. And going back to what you had said, originally, and I'll just speak frankly, originally we wanted to make those kind of interesting movies, movies like Amores Perros, movies like, just interesting slices of life in Baja, where we film, and other places. Mm-hmm. And, but the distributors are all on you like a cheap suit to get action in the movie. There's not enough action. And you realize that, and what's funny is I always want to say, you want to have the film received beautifully, take out the action and just have this beautiful little story in here, but it's always got to have a big action sequence and all this stuff. and that's the filmmaker's journey. That's what they're asking of me. That's what they request. That's what they require of me. And so we try to do those the best we can. But ultimately, you want to get to a place where that's not necessary. Whatever moves the story forward is what moves the story forward. If it's action, if it's tension, if it's emotion, whatever it is, you shouldn't have to be pigeonholed to them. Every 10 minutes, every 10 pages has to be another action sequence, or they're not going to buy it in Romania. We just want to, but I do think honestly that whole model is an antiquated model, and it's just that they made so much money from it in the past that they can't let it go. But at the end of the day, in the click world, see, they're still at Blockbuster, where you go down the aisle and you have to make a decision, and so you see Van Damme's face on the box, and with a bunch of explosions in the background, and that looks great. But in this case, I think now when people are clicking, and streaming, it's about how compelling the film is, how well the film is set up in the beginning, things like that, more so than just crazy action, because nobody can really compete with that, Marvel and, the Fast and the Furious action and things like that. Nobody can compete with that. So, I think it's about making compelling stories now. And so hopefully we're moving more to that direction. Thrillers, compelling stories that have good hooks, good setups, things of that sort. rather than just trying to make a lower budget version of Fast and the Furious or X-Men.
Do you feel like for yourself though that because the story that you want to tell and what the distributors are asking of you, that those requests, or maybe request maybe not the right word, but what they're requiring of you to do and adding those elements into the movie, do you feel like at times it's a detriment to the story that you actually want to tell, or do you feel like, okay, we knew this was coming, so I'm purposely adding these scenarios for the film for me to be able to appease the distributors and also be able to get the film out there, because it's the only way I'm going to be able to get the film done if I want people to see the movie, despite what I may not want to add. And not because I don't think you're not a fan of action, but because you feel like there's a certain story you want to tell where the action is not required, but because it's requested, you're doing it for the marketing reasons rather than for personal stories.
Yeah, it's absolutely it's usually a question of a spectrum or degree. It's not that the action or tension isn't good. It's just to what degree it is. So for example, if a guy's walking into a bar and something happens, he's got to fight his way out of the bar. That's a quote action scene. And that's fine because that's a story. That's a story point. The question is, how many guys is he going to be fighting? And, is he going to end up with the car crashing through the front door and him getting in it and his friend driving away? Well, no, the answer is no on a lower budget film. So the question is, you can integrate action into story. There are brilliant people that do that. Most of the Bourne movies are very well integrated action and tension into a good story. Also, the gold standard movies like Heat, where you have this incredible story about characters that you care about on both sides of the fence and both sides of the law. But at the same time, you've just got these amazing action sequences. So there's that other type of movie where, the guy is walking down the street and I'm going to put him in quote, thugs come out of a alley and he's got to Hong Kong fight them, all one at a time. I'm saying that's the kind of stuff I'm trying to avoid, meaning, just random displays of somebody, getting their butt kicked or kicking butt, stuff like that doesn't really matter. Look, if you can create a scenario where somebody's got to get from A to B and it's going to have some kind of conflict between the A and B, that's fine. I personally feel as though as a filmmaker, one of the things you have to be able to do is know what your limits are. They don't like me because I don't put enough action in the films, because I don't want to do, one guy shooting up 20 guys just to have a bunch of bodies falling around. I want to make it so it makes sense if possible. But this is the world that we're in. They still believe that the action sequences need to be there so that they can have an international market. They tell you that international people aren't going to always understand online dating, but they will always understand monsters. They'll understand people getting hurt and violence, and they understand sexy stuff. This is what they understand. And so, I think that though I'm incredibly happy and proud of the filmmaking journey that we've had so far, eventually you want to make films that just speak to you and speak to the genre, and without having to put anything in the film other than what's required. But unfortunately, I wouldn't want to be Christopher Nolan in Batman edit room either. You got 20 executives, telling you that scene doesn't need to be there and the scene needs to be redone. And then he's probably, what are you guys talking about? So, I think it happens at all levels of the business, unless you maybe are a specialty director like a Tarantino or Lars von Trier, people that kind of do their own thing, and they can basically tell everybody, hey, I'm me, and whatever I put out is what I put out, and I'm the brand. So, it's about striking that balance. And I try to strike the balance as much as possible. But at the end of the day, this action sequence has got to be there. And we just do the best we can with them for now until we, get some sort of huge second unit budgets. But right now we try to, integrate it so it means something in the action, which was kind of what we did with the Exodus of Charlie Wright film.
So I'm actually curious with yourself about, because I know you've worked in industry for a number of years now, but is there a part of you now when you've been started directing more often and now having several projects released in the last, I would say 10 years or so,
Yep.
where you feel like the things that I wouldn't say you weren't prepared for, but the things that you probably were expecting to deal with it, but then now that you're actually doing it, you realize, wait a minute, the way that I anticipated how to approach something, well, let's say with regards to the production or the writing, where you realize this is not going to work for me anymore to do that because of now that I'm seeing how the engine works, I gotta find a way to approach it more differently. So I'm curious to see what it was for you that you realized early on that you felt you figured out that my initial thought process how to do this here doesn't work, and now I have to find a way to change with my approach now when it comes to writing, directing, or whatever the case be, communications for that matter. So is there anything like that that comes to mind about what you really?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
We all start our filmmaking journey thinking that we're what we like, everybody's going to like, and we have these amazing ideas and we have these innovative ways to execute them, which is rarely true. Most of the stuff has been done and will be done again after you. What you learn more than anything is that, look, you're on a journey, you're on a mission, and I always look at it like, look, if I wanted to be a doctor, if you want to be a doctor today, you can't, like a year from now, be a doctor and be making money as a doctor. You're going to have to decide that, sign up for school, probably 8 years or more of school, and then all these internships and everything else. And then maybe 15 years later, maybe you can start to cash in on that, investment that you've done in that with your life. It's really the same with film. It takes a while to figure out exactly where you fit, and it takes a while to be able to capitalize on what you're doing. And in that school, like I just said, in internships and stuff, you're going to be doing some low budget movies. You're going to be dealing with people that are difficult. You're going to be doing movies that are failures. You're going to have countless amount of movies fall out at the last minute, and all those things become part of your filmmaking journey. My filmmaking journey in that case, I just didn't want to hear anymore about there wasn't enough action in it. So I said, forget it. Fine, let's do a bunch of action then. But you still have to understand what your limitations are. So I try to kind of do it a little bit prettier, a little bit more cinematic, go a little bit tighter on what action means to this character more than, just to them doing a bunch of beating people up and things like that, and having some sort of pause maybe that they take before they commit violence, and maybe how that may affect them afterwards and how it affects them permanently. All those things are in those, in the stories. So, I've learned that you have to reverse engineer, and this is part of this journey that I just described. Mm-hmm. You got to just do what people want. They want a bank robber movie. Okay, well, you got to make a movie about a bank robbery. It is, that's just what you have to try to do, and you have to make it, how they want it, or you can just wait and go to Starbucks and Pete's Coffee and have a bunch of meetings for 10 years, or you could be making films and doing your version of a film school and these life lessons that you learn, in that process. So, the idealistic, I'm going to come in with these ideas and these grandiose ideas and how to make a film and everything else. You realize that, the commercial part of that is a very, very big part of it. And the commercial elements, people that are paying for these movies can decide a lot about what it is they want and what it is they need to help secure their investments. And so you just do what it takes. You reverse engineer. You want an action film with this guy in it, and then you write the action film with this guy in it. Ultimately, though, you want to go back to where you started, the idealistic idea of filmmaking, to make a difference, to do all kinds of, to make to make it matter, and all the characters matter, and really touch people and things like that. So I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle of it now, where I'm starting to move to the place where I'm starting to do that a little bit more. But at the same time, we're still being told what to do, and that's fine. I appreciate the work. A lot of people aren't working at all, or working very little. We work quite a bit and make quite a bit of films, and so I'll take that as part of the journey. But ultimately, the place to get to is back to the original idea, to make stories that mean something without any of the formulaic limitations that they put on you.
I'm curious about something that you mentioned about that experience, that it just dawned on me to ask you right now, because one of the things that I think a lot of people are starting to notice now, at least people who are very much invested in the industry, where it comes to, you see a lot of for example, like the whole the people of color being properly representative, of various backgrounds, including sexual orientation, whatever the case may be. And the one thing I'm noticing now, and I've talked to this before with several other people about this, is that there's a lot more, it looks like there's be a lot more work, a lot more opportunities being created for various people with various backgrounds here, which is a great thing. But the thing is that I'm noticing that it's obviously starting from the ground up. Like these are the guys who are making these films, come from those respective backgrounds, but it wasn't easy for them to get the projects off the ground. It took a long time, but now that the climate's changed a little bit, it seems like a lot of more of the studio heads, whether some of them are some of the old school guys or some of the new guys who are coming in, trying to, change the regime, if you will. The only thing I've never heard about people's experience about how they feel about the distribution side of it, the guys who are outside the studio, where they have to go to make these films. Do you personally feel like the way that the climate has changed right now in Hollywood, and I would imagine all parts of the world will too, where there is awareness of bringing more proper representation, telling a really good story without telling the stereotypical story we've all been accustomed to from back in the day? And that's kind of, I would say, it might be not happening a lot less, but a lot less than it was 10 years ago. But with the distribution companies, it seems like they're still kind of stuck in the old school ways, from what I'm understanding. Do you feel like in time that will change, or do you still think it's a long way to go before they catch up and realize, hey, we don't need to do that stuff anymore. We can actually do this stuff now. We know that action sells, but we don't have to make these type of action. Let them do their thing, but let's just ask them to put a scene or two just to help with the marketing. But otherwise, they have full reign about what they want to do.
Well, I'll tell you, that's a good question, and very observant. The reality is that I think this is playing itself out more in streaming and series platforms. That there's a lot of diversity in the platforms that have series, and I just, for example, watched Yellowstone, and it's incredibly inclusive. It's just Hick, Montana town, but it's got all kinds of different people
right
in it, and in various positions of power. And I think that, as a general rule, the industry is moving more towards that kind of inclusive thing. I'm a minority director, but I do not do quote minority films. I do just run-of-the-mill action movies, and that kind of content, it can be a little difficult to sell depending on where it is, simply because urban content, because it doesn't always sell everywhere, according to them. But I think it does, and I think it's been proven that it does. But at the end of the day, I think that the people that we're dealing with are the budgets that we deal with, and the area that we deal with, which is the AFM crowd, film market crowd, that make movies, make posters, trailers, sell them, and then move on. I think they really don't care that much because they don't have. It's such a thin. It's such a thin path to profitability that they just are trying to get to profitability. They're not trying to necessarily make any points or make any kind of statement, political or otherwise. Though I think when we do cast, they do look for the diversity in the cast. This is absolutely the case. A lot of times you just don't want an all white cast or all Mexican cast, or for that matter, all Black cast. They like to see levels of diversity because people ultimately like to see themselves or versions of themselves on the screen. And so it's, they go away from the all, white casts from before. We always like to pepper in all kinds of different people. Now, that said, we're doing films in Mexico. All our films are in Mexico. So, we have a lot of quote Latin content, and I'm very careful with it. I don't make the tropes of Mexican, especially cartels, as these kind of crazy heads chopping people that actually make those villains very intelligent, very savvy with very admirable goals usually. So I use it. We do that in that way a lot. But at the end of the day, sorry about that.
No.
We do a lot of films that have a lot of diverse casts. So I try to do it because I think it just looks better. I think the canvas looks better, and I think that it's just a better look for the film. It looks more modern to have a diverse cast. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have that kind of old school look where everybody's white guy, one Black guy, maybe one Hispanic guy or Latinx guy, and one woman, and everybody else is white. Man, it's like it looks more modern to have to be creatively casting in different roles in that way.
Do you also think that okay, so here's what I want to lead to next, because there's a question I want to ask you, but I think it pertains to with day labor here, because you shared not too long ago actually in describing the plot synopsis to the film, which is that and I hope it's okay for me to bring it up here, but it was about the fact that people were using illegal immigrants as sports to pretty much with the intention of killing them, and then they happen to catch the one guy who's Hispanic but is also a veteran in the military, and they pretty much picked the wrong guy, for So my question about that one is because although when I heard the plot synopsis when you described it, I actually thought that was really interesting, but I'm really curious though about, I'm not sure, I can't remember if you provided more details about who came up with the idea, but once the idea was presented and then you're presenting it to the financiers and say, hey, we got this idea for this movie, this is what it's about. Did you ever meet any sort of resistance about, sounds like a good idea, but I don't know if we want to go with that because the climate right now is way too toxic for something like that?
Yeah. Well, first, that particular film, they brought to me fully financed, so okay. I didn't have to pitch it, and it was one of those rare ones where I was basically hired to direct it. But we were very, very much in a collaborative process with the guys at Torque Films, Ojan Mijagi and David Wax. And it was written by a guy named Sean Crane and another writer. I have to remember his name. But they did a very good job. And the reason it was, and you'll see the film, but it's they didn't make it where the stereotype that they could have easily made was the quote white family, rednecks or whatever, the ones hunting. Their reasons for doing that are very deep. Actually, it's not like they just hate Mexicans or something like that, or hate illegal immigrants. Something terrible happened to that family after showing a certain amount of love to Hispanic or Latin community, and something terrible happened to them. and it just broke them as a family, and this is the way that they're kind of coping with it, and it comes out that it's like that. So it's not like just this hatred, for somebody, and it's just so it's about making it more complex, and I think it's topical. There was the Minutemen foolishness where those guys were hunting. They see people come over the border, they're shooting them, and this is true. And this particular film is about a family that is doing this as some sort of ritualistic thing, that they feel some sort of rite of passage. But it avoids the political elements, like of just straight racism. They're doing it out of pain, family trauma, and this is the way they're coping with it. And they like I said, they just but it has a lot of things in it. Like, it's about a veteran who can't get a job to the point where he's got to go work as a day laborer, and they just tell each other don't speak English, and so they got these American vets that they think are guys just came over the border, and so that was a mistake for them. So they're finally going to get their comeuppance. But at the end of the day, but it's a very well crafted piece, and it's got action in it. But at the same time, it's very emotional, and it's got great performances by Gary, by Corin Nemec, Kevin Gage, all those guys. So it's good. It's not what most people will expect. It's a lot deeper. We made sure of that. We made sure it wasn't just about a bunch of racist, for no reason, rednecks running around hunting, people that they think will never be found. And when you do the research for the film, we did a little research. There are average of 3,000 immigrants per year that disappear and never heard from again. What happens to them? Well, this is kind of a story of what may happen to some. So,
I guess my question for you now with this movie is because it was already announced that Day Laborers is in Cannes, and it's having its premiere out there. Did you ever have any, I wouldn't say hesitation, but do you ever have any concerns rather about, okay, so we know we made a good project. The story is really phenomenal. We know that it's a very complex story. It's not just some run-of-the-mill type of like villainous rednecks who are just killing people for the sake of killing them, but there's a lot more complexity behind that. But did you ever get concerned that once the film is out, how will the public receive the film? Will they connect with it? Will they have an understanding of it? Will they get the approach you guys are going for? Do you have any concerns about how that will be looked at? Because right now, the way things are going out as far as the climate is concerned, there has been a major shift, but I think now the public's a little more wiser, I would hope to a degree, about how certain things work nowadays, that with a lot of information that's out there, even though a lot of people tend to grab just the headlines, but the information is out there. So, I would hope that people hearing this would understand the whole purpose behind it. But do you ever have concerns about how the general public may actually?
Well, there may be a strain of people that or feel that maybe we're trying to villainize people that have a alternative view of maybe illegal immigration, but that has really nothing to do with it at all. Not really. I think that it just follows two families that kind of clash into each other, and there's a lot of pain and hurt and things that people have been through as a result of different, I guess, political policies and things like war and veterans and unable to get jobs and everything else. So no, I don't think so. I think that Day Labor is actually incredibly well crafted, a story, which I do not take all the credit for, though we worked a lot on it. But it's just crafted very well as a story of families. If people will respond to it, some people will like it, some people won't. But I think that it's got an interesting message about it. And it's a message about forgiveness and a message about, how you deal collectively with trauma, and post-traumatic situations and things like that. And then it all kind of is kind of wrapped in this kind of little bit of a political thing. But we really did take a lot of care to not just purely villainize these quote redneck guys. They were actually quite complicated. And Gary will tell you that. He's actually amazing in Gary Cairns.
Yeah.
One of my actors, he'll tell you that, you know, it's very complicated, and he's just really doesn't believe in what they're doing. But, you know, he feels that this is something that, you know, he has to do because of to make his father happy and things like that. So it's pretty complicated. So I think it's going to do great. I think that people will like it, and you know, the some people won't, but some people will, and that's all you can ask for.
So, and I was going to ask you here because are you good with me bringing up about Escape from Blackwater and As Good as Dead in the conversation here?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Sure.
So, because I heard about you making these films from an interview you had last year, and yes. I was actually quite surprised that it still hasn't been released yet. I mean, I understand there's a whole different thing about, you know, the business and getting the right. I understand all that part, but I was actually quite surprised because when I did see the trailer especially for Escape from Blackwater, I actually loved what I saw in that trailer, as I did for As Good as Dead. But I'm going to stick with from Escape from Blackwater first, because when I saw that story, right away I knew, okay, you're not in Mexico, because
India, southern India,
right? So there's a lot about that I took away from the trailer that I saw. That I'll be honest with you, I'm wondering, because, you know, I try to get a feel for what could be like the film that would, I wouldn't say define a director, but define as far as like everything that they've done so far. And this one film is like the peak at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'll be frank with you. When I saw that trailer, that to me is the impression that I got off that film from you. I'm certainly not trying to disregard, you know, with what you've done in Day Labor and all the other films, but I remember right away thinking like, this looks like to be the one that could be like, you should be very aware of who Roger Ellis Frazier is, because this movie is that good. That's the impression that I got from that film.
Thank you. Well, we did that film, and it's interesting you say that, because you're very insightful, actually, because that is the film that we did the way we wanted to do it, completely. I got a collaborator and a guy that's been in a lot of my films, named Paul Sadu. And he's an incredible collaborator of mine. I'd done some other films through Ultramedia and Robert Beaumont, who's also an old friend of mine who I've done films with. But Paul called me and said, "Hey, look, I want you to do this film." And it was one of those things where it was completely being hired. They don't want the Mexico program. They don't want the cheap labor. They just wanted me, which was a very, very huge compliment to me. And I just said that, look, we want to do something. We want to do something that really stands out visually and aesthetically. It's a big film, meaning it spans over years and goes everywhere, and it's all through India and the States and everything else. And I wanted to give it a look that could be a kind of a defining style. And Paul, who also is one of the executive producers, is really good about deferring to that. He says, look, just make the film how you see it. And at that time, I was incredibly being very much influenced by what I consider the most aesthetically beautiful filming of anything in years, which is Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah, I remember you saying
that. Yeah, and it's taken a lot of it from that. So we did a lot with the action there. We moved around a lot. We had a lot of Steadicam, a lot of drone work, things like that. But I think that film is going to be absolutely stunning visually, and also very well acted, very great story. And it spans over 10 years because there's another part of it that was done before. and so forth and so on. And there's a lot of solitary moments in that film, where it takes time to breathe, And I'll say, like, as good as dead, that we did with Michael Jai White. Really, the reason it was called Nogales. He contacted me, and it's such an incredible honor. He's such an incredibly intelligent and talented man. He really is. And he's an inspiration to me. I've known him for a while, and it was just amazing that he called and asked. And so we went through a couple guys at Odyssey Pictures and stuff, Mark Klebanoff and some other people, that we had a great time doing that. Though this is a case where, the studio, which is Samuel Goldwyn, had a lot to say about the cut, a lot. And the name, the cut, how it cuts in and cuts out. So that's one part of the journey to go through a film, and they have a lot more to say about it. But when it comes to, for example, Escape from Blackwater, the one we did in India, the exec team and Paul just says, whatever looks best, we don't care if it sells one disc or one stream or 100 million. It doesn't matter. Let's just make a good film and trust that process. Ultimately, that's where you want to be, is that people will say, I trust your process. People go to Michael Mann or David Fincher. They're not going to say, well, they do that a little bit, but they trust the process more than you don't want to be just a utility director that's just out there just directing it for them. You want them to trust your sensibilities and your style, and have a little bit of a signature style, which I'm trying to build over all this time and years, and all these films. So, like I said, all part of the journey that's trying to get you to the point where you can just make what you know is good. You just make what you enjoy, make what you feel is connecting, and something that you feel has the aesthetics that you really feel represents your inner self, and then that's good enough, And if you never quite make the X-Men style movies or that budget, that's fine too. You can be an independent filmmaker, which I love to be. I love it.
Are you able to comment about when these two films are expected to be released, or is that still in the works right now to getting that finalized?
Yeah, sure. There's some films that just take longer.
Right.
And pandemic really put stopped all the in-person editing, and some people just step back. I got a film called Repeater, also with Paul Sadu, that looks really, really good. And the producer, Robert Beaumont at Ultramedia, he just wanted to make it perfect. And it's great. He does a lot in making all these little details perfect, much more than I would as the director. So we are appreciative of that. As Good as Dead is going to be a quick turnaround. That's going to be out this year. Okay. Michael Jai White film, very, 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 very good film, and he did a great job. He wrote it, and it was a lot of fun filming it. So that's going to come out quick. Blackwater, Escape from Blackwater may take a little while because it's going to. They want to get it perfect, and it might take a little bit of time. But the pandemic really put some dampers on post for literally like 2 years, maybe. We would have had it done a while back, but because you can't really go to the post house, and it was just kind of weird, and everybody didn't want to release something in the event that maybe they could get a theater release. They didn't want to do it when the theaters weren't open. There's a whole bunch of stuff. So. Yeah. But those will be out soon. As Good as Dead will be out in 2022 sometime, and Blackwater may be that as well. And Day Labor is coming out pretty soon too. They're out there premiering it at Cannes, and I think there's just a ton of people interested in that movie. Believe it or not, I just something about the subject matter, but people have really been calling about it.
Interesting. So here's what I want to just transition to something here for you real quick, because there was something that, so for example, like I remember, because I talked to Louis Mandalore last year, and from time to time I keep up with, hey, how things are going, so on and so forth. In fact, I actually messaged him not too long when I saw his episode of, when he was in the episode of The Offer, which I love that show. But Anyways, the point I'm getting is that, so, with your relationship you have with Lewis, the one thing I remembered about Lewis specific is that, I think a lot of people don't realize is that, you know, he is an overall artist apart from being an actor, director, producer, a writer to some degree, I believe, but he's also a musician as well too.
He's a
And then,
musician.
right. So, I remember, I can't remember how I came across that memory, but I remember thinking about that, and I remember coming across the video with yourself, which you post on Instagram, and you also have a YouTube channel as well too, where you also post some of your reels among your live performances.
Yeah.
And it dawned on me, I wonder if you both have ever played, because Lewis says it, I always carry a guitar wherever I go, and I figured you're the same way as well too. And I always wondered, I wonder if they
Yeah.
play together. So I was wanting to transition to that because that's something I don't really hear too much about, other than with what you post online, or I'm sorry, on
Uh,
your social media account. Because there's something about Lewis that I get the impression of when he's performing, that's a whole different expression that he has
yeah.
with the music. And I get the same thing from you as well too. You singing, playing a lot of covers, among other things as well too. But I'm wondering if the type of satisfaction you get out of that is it completely different in terms of the creative satisfaction you get from playing music than you would as with you directing the films, because I'm sure you get some sort of there's a feeling you get working in these two sides of the field here, but with filmmaking is a collaborative process. Music the same way as well too, but I feel like because when you're on your own, there's a side of you that I feel like you feel you're you feel at your best. If that makes any sense, I hope that makes sense with what I'm trying to cross here.
No, I totally get it. You're right. You said it perfect. Filmmaking is what they call craft,
Right.
where you're collaborating and getting people to do specific things, but you're just making sure that the vision is where it needs to be. But I do very much trust the people around me and I'm not heavy-handed about my directorial stuff. Music for me is just another expression. It's also an expression where you get a lot of love from music. Film. There's people that hate your movies, especially lower budget movies. They just don't understand the difference of what your resources are, and they frankly don't care, and maybe they don't need to care. But they compare your action movie to X-Men, and they're like, it sucked. Well, and they're right. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe just the end result is what matters. But at the end of the day, music for me is it's a hobby, and I just say I never have played with Lewis, but I want to, because he's very talented. He's multi-talented in a lot of ways. He's a boxer. He's a professional boxer. He's a professional martial artist. He's an amazing actor. He's a director. I could just keep going.
Yeah,
but he's also a musician. He's also a musician, and he's very good. And he's got a nice voice, and he's also a good songwriter. But yeah, I mean, I do. A lot of guys are kind of multifaceted in their arts, and I think it hones you into the art a little bit more if you know an instrument. I take my guitar wherever I go, and I have to play almost every day just as an outlet. And performing live, I just do like pubs and stuff for fun. But it's a different animal when you're playing live for an audience, and it's something about the focus that it takes, and the ability to play over distractions and things like that, and then have this true connection with the audience. It's a totally different thing. It's, in my opinion, it's a release from having to do all that corporate stuff that's involved in film. It's very pure stuff that I do. So, I do that, and it's just a big part of the overall artistic expression of my life. But there's no way to like make a living from it for me personally. Right. I'm sure that some people can, but it's just just a beautiful expression, and it's just like a cool hobby, something I'm glad I honed when I was younger, and was able to you know get that skill set developed to the point where I can do it on a semi-professional level.
When you perform live, do you feel, I don't know if it's a fair question, but I'm curious because when you go on set, I know it can be very stressful, and you've commented before that you have a pretty even keel approach to how you handle things and try to have everyone on the same playing field as well too. But music, on the other hand, because you're on your own for the most, because from the videos that I've seen I've seen you post online,
most of the time
you're mostly performing on your own. But do you have a difference in as far as how you approach that, where you maybe you may not be the way you handle yourself on a set? Is it different from how you handle yourself in getting on the stage or performing in front of an audience that may not be aware of who you are as far as like your music abilities, and there's a possibility that they may just look at you and say, that's a nice song, and then walk away while you're still playing? Like, is there a difference about how you feel about that approach as opposed to walking on the set?
Well, yeah, you have plenty of takes and everything's, you have to, you make the film in post. You just basically gathering ingredients while you're filming. So I think every time that you start a set, you think you're terrible. I do. And that's why I start with these kind of songs that that are going to be decent, it can get your confidence up, but it never gets easier. And you hear like even big people like Metallica and John Mayer talk about how it's going to suck tonight, and I was terrible. I can't hit this note. I can't hit that note. Yeah. And these guys have been doing it for 30 years. But at the end of the day, there's a point on the graph when you're playing live that you connect more with your own voice and the microphone and your instrument. And once you connect to that and feel truly comfortable in that, the audience generally connects with you. When you do cover sets, it's also very much about your song list. You have to play songs where everybody's saying, that's my song. Oh, I love that song. Hey, I love that song. You want to keep doing that. You can get tempted to play some obscure David Bowie song that you love that nobody's ever heard, and I love it. I think I sound great. But when you're playing that, you play that maybe later in your set. You want people to connect with what you're playing, and then the fact that you're curating your set to them and the audience, they appreciate that. And then whatever flaws you have in your performance, they're more likely to forgive. But as a general rule, I mean, I approach it completely differently. It's playing by yourself is incredibly vulnerable. Mm-hmm. I played last night, and you don't know how people are going to respond. And I play a lot of times in Mexico, and I'll tell you, some people, you look around and it's like, I know for a fact nobody here speaks any English. And you're thinking, I got nothing but the Beatles and Zeppelin. And you're like, I don't have any Caifanes or any songs in Spanish. I actually have a couple. But you realize, and some people, want to dance. And that's not the set I'm playing. I'm playing an acoustic arrangement set. So you find everything, but generally speaking, you get immediate love from music. They love it immediately, and they show you love with the applause and thanking you. And you take a break and they say, hey, it sounds beautiful or whatever. I love that song, and it's immediate. And then that's it. It's done. There's no, later the movie comes out and you deal with all this stuff. It's just immediate gratification. So it's just another artistic expression. And it's completely and totally different than filmmaking. Filmmaking is a collaborative process. It's craft where you're using different elements and people to make something. There's a different set of, in the collaboration in the film, you also get at the end of a great day, there's nothing like that. It's like, damn, we made the day. We got some amazing stuff. It looks beautiful. Everybody's happy. And then it's just, you feel, incredibly euphoric. And then there's another day where nothing goes right. It rained, you were late, the actors were, are in a bad mood. There's all kinds of things. So,
Yeah.
Generally though, with playing, when you play music, it's always positive. And so that's why I do it, to keep something positive in my pocket all the time. I can always pull out and do.
What's the one thing for yourself that you so for example, like as you go through performing live, learning the songs, writing songs, working on your vocals, the guitars, whatever the case may be, then you go off and do a movie. You're doing a movie, going to meetings, prepping for the film, post, and all this, everything with that. What's the one thing for yourself that you feel like you're at your most what's the best word to say it here, that you feel you're at your most confident during that process for either filmmaking or music, where you feel like no matter what I do here, I know I'm at my absolute best doing this, whether and it can be the various things that come with performing, songwriting, learning the songs, same with the films. What's that one area for you feel like,
well, if it's the two different things, the confidence in I'll start with music. There's a point in every set where you stop caring what is going on around you, and you just connect with the music and yourself and and whoever's listening. And in other words, the fear washes away, the self-consciousness washes away, and you don't worry about hitting this note or that note or remembering these lyrics, and everything gets into this really flowing process. Usually if you do a 3 or 4 set, or you 3 or 4, 45 minutes, usually the second or third one, more or less around there set, you're just get into a groove where you just are truly connecting with everything, and you're really making it all just an amazing connection. The second, as far as the second part of that question with regard to film, is I work really good under high pressure, and at the end, I let the ADs work and the DP work and everybody, the actors work with each other. But when it gets to that moment where the sun's going down, the guy's got to take his car away, and we got 4 more scenes with it. Things like that. When things get high stressful and people really need to be super laser focused, I work really well in environments like that, where under high pressure. And I'm a fourth quarter guy coming off the bench, is a good way to put it. And so I find myself in pretty that's my safe space, is under pressure, believe it or not. Some people are like, oh, well, it's just this lofty world where everything's going great. Actually, I work much better when the pressure is high and people are losing it all around me.
Is that all kinds of pressure? All kinds of pressure? Is it all kinds of pressure, or just specific type of pressure you're referring to?
Well, no, I'm this particular one I'm talking about.
Well, I meant for the set too, is what I was referring to, by the way.
The pressure, like time pressure, and mostly the pressure comes through time. To be honest with you.
Okay. So you've shared on more than one occasion before about your experiences in the film, and one movie was well received, and then you've got a lot of people reaching out to calling you, which you thought was going to lead into one thing. Because I'm referring to an interview you had done with Film Crunch, which I thought was a really good one, by the way. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that these stories that we hear, I think, well, because you said something in the just now, where people would criticize the films, especially independent films, where they say, the action's not as good as, Fast and the Furious or whatever the case may be. And I do agree that some people do have that mindset about how they look at a movie on face value and disregard it for whatever those reasons may be, because the production's not up to par, or something didn't turn out as well and just wasn't interesting for them. It varies, but it's usually they dismiss it and they kind of move on. The one thing that I always had a problem with, I've shared this before on more than one occasion, is that as the years have gone by of me talking to individuals such as yourself in various forms of art, so comedy, music, or whatever the case may be, I used to be one of those people that would dismiss a movie that say that was awful, and then I would say some of the worst things about the film. And a lot of ways it was meant to be a joke, but completely disregarding the hard work that comes with that. Mm-hmm. As I started to talk to more and more filmmakers, actors especially who worked in a lot of independent movies, and Lewis, Gary are one of the many actors that I have spoken with here that have worked in various productions of high quality, or of I don't mean to say low quality, but I mean to say a low budget film,
lower budget,
right,
lower resources.
So, because of my experiences in talking with with filmmakers such as yourself, Jesse V. Johnson, and various others, when you learn about what they've gone through to make a movie, at least it's important for me, and it's really important for me to share these stories and to hear these stories. But I'm purely coming from a spectator standpoint. I'm not actually I'm not involved in that respect, but I understand the journey enough to understand that this is not an easy process. And I've mentioned before, and you've also commented yourself too, that filmmaking is not for the faint of heart for a number of different reasons. But the thing is that what I hope, I don't think I have the ability to do this here, but I hope that, with enough conversations such as this, and especially ones you've had with Film Courage, among other places too, where you get to share these journeys and you share these stories, I hope in time that will, the general movie going audience who would dismiss an independent movie, and instead of dismissing it, understand what did it have to go there to make the movie, because clearly this was a good story, but the action wasn't very good. What had happened? And then when they look at the film and understand what had happened, then they have a better understanding about, so it wasn't as they intended on doing the scene, but then something fell through, whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. That to me is really important, because there's a lot of things I've learned about the films that I watched that I do like, but there's always something, or maybe the overall product didn't work out as well as I anticipated. But when you learn what happened, you understand, so this fell through. So I'm curious about your perspective on how, when you make a movie, I know that you want to make a film how you want, to at least as the film you can get it to as close to your vision as possible, with all the other stipulations that come into play. Right. As you started making these films now, and as the years have gone by, I'm wondering if for yourself, if anything has changed for yourself about how you view the industry, view yourself in being a part of the industry, especially in the independent side of it too, because I think a lot of people get the impression that if you make movies, that some people tend to believe that you're doing very well, therefore you make a lot of money, you've worked with a lot of high caliber actors, but yet how come I've never heard of these guys? So there's a perception, and I think there's a misconception about how films are made, and if you work on this movie, that means you're at this bottom of the tier. And if you work on these films, you're at the top of the tier, but it doesn't always necessarily work out that way. Sometimes you have a lot of high caliber actors who work on very high caliber films, and then they work on very low budget films, and it turns out to be some of their best work, but no one's ever heard of them. Mm-hmm. So I know it's a long question, but I'm really curious about how you perceive how things have changed. And I'm wondering if, from your perspective, if you feel like the landscape of filmmaking and the audience perception of filmmaking in high studio films to the low budget films, the indie films, if you feel like things are getting more, audience getting more wiser to that, where they're understanding that things aren't necessarily what they seem to be, and there's a bigger picture behind the story that hopefully in time will have them change their perspective and their respect for the filmmaking process in itself.
Right. Well, I really appreciate that you say that, because not many people are thinking that way, that are thinking in terms of, well, maybe I didn't connect with the film, but I still respect what it took to get the film made. But at the end of the day, we're in a business, and that's a beautiful thing, and I think that's an introspective thing, right? And makes you a better, more empathetic person. Though on the other side of that, though, either the film works or it doesn't, and we've all made films that don't work, and for various reasons. And the point is that it just needs to work. It's very difficult to say, well, the film was horrible, but I liked that they got it done. But that's not why we go to movies. We're watching just a screen. There's a reason the screen's flat and we can't see what's behind it,
right,
or what's behind the camera. Otherwise, we do a big 360 thing where we can. I'm sure that some of the most fun documentaries will always be the making of a movie. People love the behind the scenes look at making of a movie. Nobody says, you know what, the behind the scenes of that movie sucked. Nobody ever says that because it's always interesting. But at the end of the day, we have to. The goal should be to make good movies that connect with their audience. You can't connect with everybody, but you should connect with them. And it would be nice that on a human level to be appreciated for the effort. But at the end of the day, either it works or it doesn't. And I'd rather work to try and find the balance that make the films work and connect with the audience, rather than try to find some way to have somebody appreciate a film, not like the film, but because they realized how much I saved it from the brink of disaster. Now they like it. Okay, well, that's fine. If you want to watch Hearts of Darkness or any of the great behind the scenes films of the making of films, those are great. And some of the best dramas, because Lord knows a lot of drama goes into making those films. Yeah. But at the end of the day, Apocalypse Now needed to work, and that worked. And what it took to make it is a whole nother thing. But those are two, in my opinion, very independent things. So I've learned, to your question, I've learned over this time that you will be on that journey. There is no shortcut. And I think that, and it's so interesting, I've talked to sometimes younger directors, and they think, well, my film, this and that. I said, look, you don't have to make this film perfect. This is part of your overall film journey. You're not going to get, maybe one or two examples of these young 28-year-old director that comes out and becomes a big hit. I don't know any directors that I admire that are under 60. I mean, I really don't. I mean, Coppola, Spielberg, all those guys are really 70 or older, or pushing 80. The point is that, I don't have a 31-year-old first-time filmmaker that I'm sitting there thinking, oh, that's great. You know what? Even if you do that, I mean, look at what happened to Good Will Hunting. I mean, they came out and did this Oscar stuff, and it meant nothing. I mean, they still had to go through that whole thing, in their whole career, and up and down and all that stuff. And one of the things that Ben Affleck said when he got his award finally for his Academy Award, he said, I was just a kid. I didn't know anything. I mean, we were just up here playing, and it's true. And so the first film, second film that you do, you're just, you think it's going to be a big success. If you only could have the vision to see that it doesn't need to be a big success. What it needs to happen is do exactly what you said, which is to get it done and learn the lessons, become a better filmmaker. There are no filmmaking prodigies like Mozart. It doesn't work that way. I mean, maybe every once in a while, but even if I see some kid get lucky at Sundance, and then they're up there telling me about how great a filmmaker they are, nobody's listening to them. I mean, the people that you're going to listen to the people that have been through the journey that it's supposed to be. I mean, good. Hey, look, that's a beautiful thing if you can have a one-time hit, but everybody's thinking this guy's going to go through some other things too. And, he's going to have some flops. He's going to have to get knocked down. He's going to lose his agent. He's going to probably maybe lose his girlfriend or wife, whatever it is. There's going to be and then maybe on the other end of that, then he can become the filmmaker that he's supposed to be. There's no overnight success in filmmaking. So it just takes the journey. And so what I like to do, and this is something that I try to do consistently throughout what I do, I try to add aesthetically pleasing things in all the films I do. I don't, I make sure of it. And it takes sometimes a little bit too much time, but I want to make sure that that is the thread, that at least the films always look pretty. They look pretty with a good production value. And eventually I want to get to the point where I can do more Escape from Blackwater type films, where they're just beautifully aesthetically pleasing films with, that have great talent in them and so forth and so on. So, yeah, I mean, the lessons are abound in this business. Mm-hmm. And you've got to just toughen yourself up and be ready for the years of learning and the years of development and the years of failure, and victories, small victories, tough times, tight money times. It's going to have all of it. And you just have to have faith that you are sticking to your core values, which is, I want to make a good movie. I want to make good movies. I want to work with good people, and I want to connect with the audience. As long as you keep that in mind as you go through the journey, you'll be fine. Don't get bogged down. Don't get discouraged. And discouraged is going to come from thinking you're supposed to have an overnight success. I'll say it again. There are no overnight successes. And if there's a great overnight success, some hotshot director that gets, I don't know, Sundance or whatever, let me see him 10 years from now. see if everything is just like that. I doubt it. I bet you $10 it went. The bottom dropped out 5 times. And then at the end of those years or whatever, that's the guy who you can look at and say, he went through what he needed to go through. And now I'm going to rock with him on his filmmaking journey as he goes to try to find excellence.
About something that I've noticed with you, and you've touched upon it before on several occasions here, but what I'm really curious about with you now, and I'm hoping that you can indulge me with this here, because with the variations of success you've had, with the films you've worked on and the various actors you've worked on, and the amount of projects that you've worked on right now that have yet to be released, and in particular with Escape from Blackwater, which is a film, as I mentioned before, that I picked out as like, this looks like to be the film that could be more or less the identity of Rogers as far as the director is concerned. But I'm also curious about, with those various successes you've had and also the various failures you've also experienced as well too, and not just in the entertainment industry, but things that also affected you in your life that then carried over into into your career, or from your career into your life, because it all intertwines with each other. Did you ever feel like at any point that this is too much? I've been doing it for such a long time now that maybe I should just take a step away from it because I can't deal with it right now, with the hurdles you have to go through? Or if you felt that way, what did you do to snap yourself out of it to be able to continue on here? Because you said it best before, and I've talked to a lot of other people in the industry as well too. This is a very, very rough business. And I don't think a lot of people understand that when they see your name on a film, if they don't like your films, oh, it's another Roger movie. Mm-hmm. But he did 6 other films before that I didn't like. What I hope they would understand is that, how's he still making his films, but not asking in a way to be dismissive or condescending, but ask how's he making this movie, because he's doing something he clearly loves, but what has he done to be able to overcome those hurdles of the criticism and the setbacks that we probably will never hear about, that made you decide, I'm still going to grind through this here despite those setbacks that I'm always going to be dealing with no matter what?
Yeah, good question, man. One, no, I don't ever consider to quit or to step back. I just have a faith that we'll just keep grinding and get to where we need to get to. And it just is part of it. And there's nothing else I can do. I mean, nobody's gonna, I can't go get some job or something like that at this point in my life. So the universe provides. Just make sure that you take care of the little things in your life, take care of your health, take care of your family, concentrate on the work, just be honest, and do your best, and be forgiving, and try to keep your soul clean if you can. And then eventually things will work out for you. And I don't what's the word, entertain the idea that I'm going to have to do something different. Secondly, you're like I said, all these things are intertwined. Your personal life, your professional life, your creative things that you do. And, I guess the thing I try to do is just try to keep myself as clean as possible. And the way you do that is to be forgiving, because there's no way to do what we're doing here for as long as we've been doing it, which isn't really that long. With a lot of people, we've been doing it for about 14 years or something. Talked to a lot of people. I've been doing it for 30 years, but you just keep yourself clean and you forgive. You don't turn on people. You treat people fairly, and you try to be as honest as possible. Maybe you can't tell everybody everything all the time, but you just try to be as forgiving, and I say forgiving a lot here, don't I? There's a reason for it. Because this is a business where people are coming after you, and we have something in Mexico. We have a filming program here that people want, and they're constantly trying to get it. So one of the ways you get it is to try to take down the leader of it. Tell them this guy's a bad guy, and there's a whole cottage industries of these guys are bad, but I can do the same thing as them, type of thing. So it's you just have to just let all that stuff just pass. And you want to just be fighting back all the time against things, but you just can't. You just got to let them go. And those things, those are the real life lessons. That's a superpower. And to never turn on your clients, no matter how bad they get, and they get bad sometimes. Just always be there for them, and learn to just try to be as good a person, honest a person, open a person, listen, try to give, be generous, things like that, and let the universe kind of plot your course to some sort of success that you want. And you have to have faith in that. And if you don't, then you're going to end up having plan B and plan C. I don't personally have a plan B or plan C. I'm going to do this. And I think that, people will recognize it. And like I said, people will say, well, you do lower budget movies. Yeah, but they always have something special. That's why I'm very careful about how I curate my reels. They're always got some kind of beauty in them that is not always characteristic of a low budget action film. If I'm just known for that, that's enough for me. Meaning, yeah, they do low budget action, but they certainly look nice. That is part of the trajectory where I'm getting to. So eventually, you look at somebody in the eye when they come to you to do a film, whatever, and they know you know what you're doing. They know that you've been through enough. And if I say to them, look, we can do this film like this, it's going to look like this for this money, we can do it. They can see that you've done it. You've been through the worst of it. You've been through the best of it, and you know what you're doing. And so that's something that has a lot of value to it in the marketplace. So the ultimate goal, though, is to just worry about how the films look and how they're perceived, and kind of step back so much from the money. But believe it or not, even those X-Men people and stuff and Fast and the Furious, those budgets go wildly over budget. I mean, to the point where it mind blowing to me how like $20-30 million over budget. How do you do that? I mean, what anyway, but the bottom line is, my point in saying that is that everybody, regardless if you're at the top or at the bottom, we all have the same kind of problems. There's never quite enough money. There's never quite enough time. There's always issues, interpersonal issues with people and things and places, and it's just. And last thing I'll just thing is, I don't want to mention the movie by name, but there's just some controversial thing for this big terrible accident that happened on a movie. You know what I'm talking about? Recently, and somebody was killed. And all I'm thinking of is that, man, oh man, they had all that quote money, and they can't do those basic things that we do with almost no money. Wow. And it just tells you it doesn't matter. And the complaining of the crew and the complaining of the actors and the disorganization. And you think that that's not going to happen once you get money. And it does. It happens. In fact, sometimes it's worse. So just feel comfortable where you are. Feel lucky enough to be doing what you're doing and doing something that you love. And being part of a very exclusive club, of independent filmmakers on whatever level, whether you're actor, director, producer, crew member, whatever, and just try to find a happiness in that, and then you're winning in life.
So, but in closing with this here, I did want to say that having heard you speak before in the past, there's actually quite a lot that I've taken from you, and especially in this conversation as well, too, which is why I was trying to be very careful in how I want to ask the questions of you, because, the things you've shared before in the past have been really insightful and very, very helpful. But I always try to find a way to dig in deeper to see if I can get something else out of you that, that maybe some people may hear like, oh, he shared this before too, but did you hear this side of it here too? Because he didn't delve into. So that's what I'm aiming for here.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
The fact that you have been able to give me your time, even though, you had a meeting today, and I appreciate you still making the time for me. I really do. Thank you for that.
My pleasure.
This conversation for me I was looking very much to, because I was hoping that with what I was able to ask you and with what you're able to provide here for me, would enlighten me in a lot of ways. And to be frank with you, it really did. So I really do appreciate sharing those stories here with me in that regard. But otherwise, for the camera here, I really can't thank you again for the time you've given here, because, you don't know how these conversations will turn out. I have an idea how it will go with how I'm trying to get this conversation started here. But at the end of the day, it could just go all over the place. So I was pretty confident in feeling that the conversation would go rather well. So I hope that with what you and I have gone through here, that you will walk away with something out of this as well too for yourself. So I hope
it's been great. You're right. The questions are. It's nice to talk a little bit more about how it affects you as a person. People want to talk about a lot of information, and it's good. And nobody's ever asked me about my music and how that integrates into my overall life. But it's true. It's very much, we all operate on a spectrum of who we are. It's, we're not binary, one dimensional. And so whatever, makes us kind of get there, it's important, I think. And also to your audience and people that will watch, if just some kernel of information makes them say, okay, hey, maybe I was gonna quit, but maybe it is just a journey, and maybe I shouldn't look for overnight success and things of that sort. And so maybe that can help. Then that's a good life as men, as humans. Yeah. We can help people and give people some sort of inspiration as elders as we get up here in age, like me.
All right. So on that note, we'll go ahead and close off here. But I want to say thank you so much here for your time again, Roger.